in our political, this arc of politics that we're enduring now. I'm curious how both of you think about the political environment today and what it means for innovation, for creating change, and how it's changed from maybe a year ago.
Well, I'm up on the Hill a lot, and the acrimony is real. I mean, the intensity of sort of viewing everything in an oppositional way is very real. I'm starting to think I see some cracks of sunlight and a desire to work together on something. But, I would just come back to the point that people do, in theory, want to find something they can work together on. So the more you can bring that to them, the more progress you can make, or get the media on your side, tell your story without Washington, and let things trickle up. Let people notice you locally. And I would emphasize, a lot of people come to CNN and they're like, I'm a little person in this little town. The way we notice usually is if you get some local attention and you rise. You get a little more and it gets bigger and it trickles up. And that seems to penetrate here in DC because then your local representative knows about you and they start making noise and you get attention. You agree?
Yeah, no, that's exactly, and I only build on that to say, I think the way we're thinking about it from the office's perspective is it is about community solutions. And how do we start with communities and what communities are doing and then let that trickle up too, because it's not just what the government can do. The government can do its part and we can get the bill passed and we can get the legislation and we can get the policies right. But the solutions and what's happening, when we think about the Serve America Act, the real impact is on the ground in local communities. And when we see what's happening there, it's how we're going to learn of how to change policies and come from what we see isn't working, and that's very important. And one of the things that's been interesting is how many mayors and governors are working because they're interested. I mean, when you go to a mayor, whether you go to a Republican or a Democrat or an independent mayor, what they care about is solving problems in their communities. And when we can think about how to bring those together, I think we really do begin to show that it is about solving problems and not about the acrimony, but it's hard.
Okay. Any questions? Do we have a question from someone?
Wow.
I have a question about, when I hear the word innovation, I also think of experimentation, right? And when you're talking about community solutions, sometimes it's a result of an experimentation because nothing necessarily within the institutions necessarily worked. So I wonder in the context of getting resources and partners to support community solutions when there isn't evidence-based outcomes, for example. I just wonder what your thoughts are on that, because that is the conundrum that a lot of our organizations and our volunteers and our volunteer leaders find themselves in.
That's a great question. I think there's two parts to that. One, on the innovation side and experimentation side, I think when you look at the Innovation Fund, for example, at the Department of Education, it's got three parts. The first part is about innovative ideas that have potential. The second part is about those that have some proof but have the ability to replicate, and the third part is about actual proof that things have worked, and it's about evaluation. So I think we're thinking about it in different parts, but I think, and I say this to some of the philanthropy also, which is experimentation doesn't always have to come from the government. It can also come from philanthropy and the local philanthropy, because that is really where the risk capital is. The risk capital is hard to be in government, and Jessica may differ on this, but it's hard to be risk-taking when you have to spend taxpayer dollars. Well, we really do need some proof that something's going to work, but I think we're willing to try it, but that it's got to be mitigated in some ways.
Just kind of building on that with the local initiatives versus taking something and trying to bring it to scale. I'm kind of interested in your thoughts on, what makes something work in one community might be particular to the characteristics of that community, and then when you try to bring it to scale and try to make the solution that worked in that community work on a national level, how do you realize the balance between which local initiatives are working because of the unique set of factors in that particular situation, and then what are kind of the universal truths that can be expanded and can be taken to scale? from Volunteer Arlington, which is a hands-on affiliate?
No pressure.
Easy questions. I think even those things that work in local communities don't have to necessarily be scaled from a local community, but there are factors in each of those successes that can be replicated in other communities, whether you take some pieces of what's worked and replicate it, or whether you take the whole thing. I don't think the whole model always has to be replicated wholly, completely, but it is what you can take. And I think what's important for organizations to think about, and frankly the government to think about, is to cull out kind of what were the important factors for the success and be able to share that information across communities. So it's not just replicating the exact same model, but also thinking about how those models can be varied according to the community it's in.
Now, when you cover stories of successful things in a community, you're looking at it from, I would imagine, a slightly different point of view.
We look for a story that tells a larger story about what's going on in a microcosm. And we're always looking for a character. That's the thing that gets the media's attention. And it doesn't have to be conflict-driven, despite everything you read and hear. We are looking for stories about things that work. There's so much bad news we know we need to bring to people, engaging opportunities to feel good and to feel like there are solutions. But it has to have some sort of exciting character or some narrative arc that's exciting.